Hi, my name is Keunwoo Park and I'm from UIST. Today, I'll present our work, DeepFisheye, a system that tracks multiple fingers near a touchscreen. This is a joint work of UIST and Imperial College London. Most smart devices use a touchscreen as an input space. However, a touchscreen's input space is limited to the size of its physical area. Therefore, some studies have expanded input space to above the touchscreen, which is a near-surface space. Moreover, some studies expanded input space to multiple fingers. For example, a smart device can distinguish which finger is in contact with the touchscreen, and each finger can be used as a different input. These two approaches are both attractive because they can expand input space while enabling natural interaction. For example, Aeropol's touch and hand C demonstrated how medial interaction could expand an input space. MacTouch and TriTap are examples of practical finger identifying technology. Existing medial finger tracking technologies can recognize a fingertip, but they cannot distinguish which finger it belongs to. On the other hand, finger identifying technologies cannot track fingers in midair. How can you support both interactions with a single technology? If there is a single technology that can track all the fingers' locations above a touchscreen, it can support both interactions. We define the term near-surface multi-finger tracking technology. It tracks each finger's locations above a touchscreen, which can support both mid-air and finger-aware interactions. We had these four criteria for near-surface multi-finger tracking technology for smart devices. First, it should support various sizes because there are many different sizes of smart devices. Second, it should work in various environments. Smart devices can be carried around anywhere. Third, it should have a minimal physical footprint to fit into a smart device. Lastly, it should not require any additional accessories for a user to wear. We thought the vision-based method could satisfy all the criteria because current camera modules are very small and it does not need any gloves or rings. However, it is hard to install a camera on a smart device and capture the whole hand's image due to its limited field of view. Therefore, usually a camera is installed at a distance from the interaction space. We solved this issue by using a fisheye camera. A fisheye camera with 100 degrees of field of view can capture the hand image no matter where the hand is located. Now, I'll introduce the fisheye prototype. A fisheye camera is attached to the bottom of the touchscreen. It tracks finger joint locations above the touchscreen using deep learning model. It can also classify which finger is in contact with the touchscreen. Moreover, it can classify hand posture of the touching hand. I will explain the working principle behind the DeepFisheye. Everything starts from a fisheye RGB image. First, it goes through the pix-to-depth network, which converts an RGB image to a depth image. Then, it isolates the hand part from the RGB image using the depth image. The two images are combined and fed into the hand pose estimation network. The hand pose estimation network outputs the 3D locations of all the joints. From this output, it is possible to classify contact finger and hand postures. I will explain the essential parts of this pipeline in more detail. The pix-to-depth network follows the encoder-decoder model. It encodes the hand pose information and generates depth from the encoded data. The hand pose estimation network is the modified version of the ResNet network. Please see our paper and supplementary document for the complete description of all the networks. Audiences might wonder why we generated the depth image in the middle rather than directly estimating the hand pose. let me share some part of our design process. Most of the hand pose estimation methods crop hand part of the image to improve hand pose estimation accuracy. However, it is hard to crop hand and run hand pose estimation with fisheye images because hand's image changes significantly based on its location. For example, the hand posture in picture A, B, and C are all the same, but hand images are all different. Therefore, we need a new technology to improve hand pose estimation accuracy in the whole image. And this is how we ended up with adding depth images as an intermediate output. So does generated depth image improves hand pose estimation accuracy? In our experiment, yes it does. The blue and pink lines represents the results of pipeline with and without pixel depth network, respectively. PCK is a percentage of corrected key points at a certain threshold. A key point is assumed as corrected if its error is less than the threshold. The hand size is distance from the wrist and the start of the middle finger. When we tested the two pipelines with and without the pixel depth network, the pipeline with the pixel depth network showed higher PCK, which means it was more accurate. We used synthetic images for this test, which will be explained in the later part. For the contact fingers, DeepFisheye can classify all 5 fingers, and it also can classify 3 hand postures, which are open, pinch, and point. DeepFisheye uses simple rule-based classifiers. The contact finger classifier just finds the nearest fingertip from a touch point. And hand posture classifier utilizes which fingers are folded to distinguish the 3 postures. For example, if only middle, ring, and little fingers are folded, it is a pinch posture. Every deep learning model is a proper dataset. Here is how we created our DeepFisheye datasets. Fisheye images are very different from normal pinhole camera model images. Therefore, hand images took with the fisheye camera were necessary for us. Even though there are many different hand datasets, we could not find the one with fisheye images. So we created our own DeepFisheye datasets. There are 2 datasets. First one is the synthetic dataset. We used a virtual hand model and collected images in the virtual environment. Specifically, we collected the color images, depth images, and 3D hand joint data. There are many benefits to this approach. It is possible to collect a large number of images with a small cost. It is possible to collect accurate hand joint data, and it can randomize background and the skin of color easily. However, the problem is that synthetic images are different from the real images. Therefore, when the model was trained with only the synthetic data, it did not perform well with the real images. The real dataset fills this domain gap. It comprises fisheye images and 3D joint data, which was collected with the lip motion device and the fisheye camera. The synthetic dataset contains 233,000 images, and the real dataset has 42,000 images. The bottom images show the sample images of the datasets. We trained the deep learning model with a synthetic dataset first, and fine-tuned the model with the real dataset. The synthetic dataset was used first because it has more data with more diverse hand poses and backgrounds. This process led the network to learn basic knowledge of the shape of the hand and distortion of fisheye images. And as mentioned earlier, the real dataset teaches the network how real images are different from the synthetic images. We evaluated DeepFisheye through a user test. We recruited 12 participants. We evaluated 3 things: 3D finger tracking accuracy, contact finger classification accuracy, and hand posture classification accuracy. We collected images from 4 different locations. We collected 3D joint locations with the lip motion device. Participants moved their hands above the lip motion device and fisheye camera for 2 minutes. We collected data with hands opened because in a previous study, users preferred to open their hands when they used finger-aware interfaces. For the classification accuracies, we collected fisheye images and touch points for each finger and postures. Participants had to touch the touch screen and move their fingers all around the touch screen. 500 to 700 samples per trial were collected. I want to emphasize that collected data was only used for testing, not for training. The 4 different locations were workshop, cafe, seminar room, and outside terrace. We chose these locations to consider different backgrounds and lighting conditions, and these are the sample images. We analyzed the accuracy of 3 different sizes of areas: large tablet size, small tablet size, and smartphone size. It doesn't mean that we used 3 different devices, but we analyzed data in 3 different target areas. First, let's see fingertip tracking error. We analyzed Euclidean error and PCK error. The average Euclidean errors were around 2 cm, and 80% of errors were less than 3 cm. The second is finger classification accuracy. The average accuracies were around 83% across the 3 device sizes. The thumb showed high accuracy because it is far from other fingers. The accuracies were high at the center of the screen and low at the boundaries. It is because when the hand is far from the camera, some parts of the hand was occluded and highly distorted, as you can see in the picture C. Hand posture accuracy showed a similar trend. The boundary parts showed low accuracies and for the same reason. Overall accuracies were around 90%. The pinch gesture and point gesture were mostly confused due to its similarity. We implemented a few interaction scenarios using DeepFisheye. Let's say a user is using a painting app and it has a single button. A user approaches his finger to preview what functions are mapped to different fingers. Then a user selects a tool that he wants to use. As another scenario, modifying shapes can be done naturally with DeepFisheye. A user can load the menu to put a shape on the canvas with the thumb finger. Then, a user can move a shape with the pinch posture and copy with the point posture. The fisheye camera that we used is too big to be attached to a smart device. However, we think it is possible to shrink down the camera size, just like the ones in the smartphones. Then, DeepFisheye can be applied to smartwatches and smartphones. In conclusion, we propose DeepFisheye, a near-field finger tracking solution for mobile devices. We evaluated DeepFisheye's tracking and classification accuracies, which proves that DeepFisheye is a feasible concept. We share the code and datasets for other researchers who are interested in the hand pose estimation with fisheye images. For the code, datasets, and more information, please visit our GitHub page or our project page. Thank you very much.